Missouri School of Journalism, welcome to Global Journalist. I'm Jim Flink. The militant group Al-Shabaab has wreaked havoc across Africa throughout this decade. A cell of Al-Qaeda, the group has launched attacks on civilians throughout Somalia, Kenya, and Uganda, and is responsible for the deaths of thousands of people this past weekend. 29 people were killed in Kenya by armed militants. Al-Shabaab claimed responsibility for the attack soon after. Today on Global Journalist, we're going to take a look at the rise of Al-Shabaab, its attacks in the region, and what the group's emergence means for Africa. We're joined today by Uduak Amimo, a Kenyan journalist who is working for Royal Media Services. She also hosts a weekly political talk show on Citizen TV. Harrison Masiko is an editor for The Daily Nation, the most widely circulated newspaper in Kenya, now at the Washington Post for the summer, and he joins us from Washington, D.C., and also David Shin. He's a professor of international affairs at George Washington University, also former U.S. ambassador to Ethiopia. Thanks to one and all for joining us today on Global Journalist.
Thank you for having us.
Uduak, let's start with you because there have been a couple of developments there in Nairobi and throughout Kenya this week. Bring us up to date.
Well, the week got off to a fairly political start because the opposition, the main opposition alliance, CORD, which is headed by the former Prime Minister Raila Odinga, held a massive, what they're not calling a rally, but to all intents and purposes, it was a rally. They held a massive rally to relay their grievances against the government. And so in the run-up to that rally, they'd been going across the country holding what they called public consultations, which would culminate in what happened on Monday, the mother of all rallies. Now, over the past couple of weeks, they've been calling for national dialogue of issues they say are of grave concern to Kenya, which they feel the government is not tackling. Chief among these, insecurity. But what was different about Monday was they changed their call for national dialogue to a call for a referendum. So that was different. What was also different, I think, on the media side was where you would traditionally have live coverage of an event of this scale. There wasn't any coverage of this rally. There was a heavy security presence to the extent that there were jokes that Kenya would be better served if some of the security who were at the rally had been deployed to the coast, where, of course, we've had all this violence in recent weeks.
Harrison Masiko, specifically in Lamu, has been a city that has seen a great deal of violence. You've been tracking this for quite a while now. This violence seems to be stemming from the north, from Mogadishu and Somalia. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Actually, the violence is concentrated in Mogadishu, but it has been trickling and crossing over the border into Kenya. It started with the northern parts like Wajir, Mandera, and then in recent times you've seen the coast taking a beating more than any other region. The recent attacks in Lamu that left almost over 60 dead a few weeks ago. Then most recently the ones Uduak is talking about is also happened around Lamu. So you find that Al-Shabaab has been, they believe it has been crossing over at Kiunga, actually the region between, the ocean region between Somalia and Kenya, and then crossing into the archipelago and attacking civilians there. Now, there are several reasons given, and then these are just theories because no one has come forward to prove all this. When the 60 people were slaughtered in Peketoni, everybody believed it was Al-Shabaab. But then the government denied this and dismissed the responsibility that Al-Shabaab actually had taken for the attack. The recent ones, Uduak can tell us better. I'm not in Kenya. I don't know who has claimed the responsibility, but I heard police saying it's MRC. Now, MRC is MRC is an illegal group in Kenya. It was proscribed some time back, and they have been agitating for their rights. It's a group that has been claiming that the coast region has been marginalized since its independence in 1963, and they have been asking Nairobi to give them what belongs to them in terms of land and the rest. The region is full of landless people, and the natives, the people who were born there, are actually landless, and the land is more owned by people from up country, which is not from the coast region. And they have been saying, okay, we believe we've been something that really belongs to us has been taken away from us, and we need it back. So MRC came up with the grievances, and is it 2011 and 2012? It started attacking police stations and the rest. Then it was suppressed. Then it went underground. Now, Al-Shabaab came in with the radicalization of the youth in Mombasa and other regions in Coast, and it's believed now it's the one that has joined forces with Al-Shabaab and wreaking havoc in Coast region. All this is speculative because police have not given any evidence to that effect.
Before we go to the ambassador, go ahead, Uduak, and weigh in on that.
Right. Just to build on what Harrison says, there are deep-seated grievances at the coast where the Mombasa Republican Council, the MRC, has been has been active. And yes, it is illegal. The government, every time there's been an attack at the coast, the government, following the initial attack in Mpeketoni, and remember there was another attack in Mpeketoni days later, the government says these are local grievances to the effect, and so the governor there, the governor of Lamu, was arrested and implicated. In the papers today, we're told that other people from Lamu were also arrested in relation to the attacks in and around the area. So the government's line is that these attacks are local grievances to do with land, because as Harrison says, people from other parts of Kenya were settled at the coast. And so the people at the coast feel disenfranchised. But what's alarming about the killings is that they're targeting men, right? And they're targeting men from a specific ethnic group.
Yes.
That ethnic group comes from central Kenya. Right. And so there's a feeling that they're being targeted to send a message to the government, which is believed to represent people from, central Kenya, that they're not happy and they should go back where they came from. Yes. But there are those who believe that people from the MRC have gone into Somalia. They've been trained, they're being sponsored by Al-Shabaab, and they've come back to Kenya to carry out these killings. And so witnesses talk about people speaking very fluent Swahili. Mm-hmm. And of course, as with most languages, their regional accents and dialects. So they've been able to pick out coastal Kiswahili, they've been able to pick out English, but they've also been able to pick out Somali.
Okay, in a moment I want to get to the ambassador, but first you're listening to Global Journalist. I'm Jim Flink. We're looking at the rise of Al-Shabaab, its attacks in the region, and what the group's emergence means for Africa. Joined today by Uduak Amimo, a Kenyan journalist working for Royal Media Services. She also hosts a weekly political talk show on Citizen TV. Harrison Masiko is an editor for The Daily Nation, the most widely circulated newspaper in Kenya. He is in Washington this week. And David Shun is a professor of international affairs at George Washington University and a former U.S. ambassador to Ethiopia. You can listen to this and other full episodes of Global Journalist on our website. That's globaljournalist.org. For more Global Journalist content, you can also like us on Facebook, or you can follow us on Twitter. That is at Global Journ. So, Ambassador, want to talk a little bit about the rise of Al-Shabaab, also the concerns about Akim, Al-Qaeda in the Islamic Maghreb, and also Boko Haram, and these various sort of groups that are being labeled as terrorist groups, now seeming to sort of be winding their way through Africa. Is that a fair characterization? And if so, how concerned are you about it?
Yeah, let me just say a brief comment about Al-Shabaab and the MRC, although I'm not in a position to add any additional information on the degree to which the indigenous Kenyan MRC group is aligned with Al-Shabaab. I think it's pretty clear that Al-Shabaab is involved in these attacks in the coastal part of Kenya. They are taking part and are taking advantage of local grievances there, that's true. And there may very well be alignment with the MRC. I think the unfortunate thing is that this has now become an internal political issue in Kenya, and it is detracting from the ability of both the government and the opposition to deal with the problem in a meaningful way. Going back to your question, though, about the AQIM and Boko Haram, you're quite right. There are a series of groups now that have metastasized throughout Africa in the aftermath of the decline of Al-Qaeda that have now become serious threats in their local areas. I don't think there's substantial connection among them. I think there is some interaction. There may be occasional training, but by and large, I think these are independent elements, one from the other. I literally just came from a briefing on Capitol Hill today concerning Boko Haram, and the discussion was really focused on the internal issues in northern Nigeria and neighboring Cameroon, Chad, Niger. No mention of links to AQIM or Al-Shabaab, although I don't rule that out. But it's quite true that all three of these organizations are very worrisome at the moment, particularly Boko Haram and Al-Shabaab.
So, Harrison, the situation that's going on in Lamu, this is an area where there has been, as you said, a lot of folks are landless. How much of what is going on there has to do with that sort of economic state of being disaffected, as opposed to maybe other issues? For instance, the whole issue of Central Africans living on the coast, that kind of thing.
On the economic side, what is driving the whole conflict in terms of economics?
Right.
Actually, land is the basic. Land is one of the factors of production that no one will ever want to lose, especially in an economy that's based on agriculture like Kenya. So everybody will want to have land, and the people at the coast feel like this was our father's land. And there is this community that was brought here by the first president of Kenya, Mzee Jomo Kenyatta, and then settled in this area called Mpeketoni. Actually, Al-Shabaab was saying that land belongs to Muslims, and the people along the Kenyan coast has got the majority of Muslims living in Kenya. So they were like, that land belonged to Muslims, and then there are these Christians who came from central Kenya and settled here, and they are they are making these other guys lack factors of production. They cannot farm, and then the area called Mpeketoni, actually how these people came in is that the coast people asked the first president of Kenya to bring them tractors to actually plow that land and farm. But then the president brought the tractors and some other people from his community. So these people are like, we asked for tractors. You brought us tractors and other people alongside the tractors. So they were very bitter, but they never wanted to show it at that time because the first president is believed to have been iron-fisted, although he did not do it outrightly, but he did not take criticism so easily. So they kept quiet, and we never knew it was a wound that was just covered to actually fester, and now it has blown open, and then the germs are now coming out, and everything is a mess. So the locals in coast believe land, which is a major factor of production in Kenya, was taken from them, and they believe they are poor because they don't farm on that land because other people took it from them. Thank you.
Uduak, this is an area, Lamu, that is normally a place where tourists, especially Western tourists, go. The fact that a Russian citizen was killed there, and the fact that Al-Shabaab has sort of issued an edict to all tourists to say that this is a war zone and that they should not come, that also sort of plays into this, does it not, in terms of economic factors?
I think we've got to be careful. I think the Russian tourist was killed during a mugging. She was with two other people and a tour guide. And when they were accosted, everyone else handed over their property, but she resisted and got shot as a result. So that criminality is separate from the violence, whether it's terrorists or not, whether it's terrorism or not, that's taking place in Lamu. Harrison is right to point out land as a factor of production. But Kenya, like most other African countries, most people here of a certain generation have a very strong attachment to land. Okay, most of us who live in the city, well, maybe not my generation, but take for instance my parents, or my mom would have a house in the city, but consider her home to be her village.
Yeah.
And if anything, God forbid, were to happen to her, she would curse me from her grave if I attempted to lay her to rest in the city. And so that's the attachment that is going on. People want to own something. They want to know that they have a place to be buried in, and they want to know that their descendants will have access to that place. Hence the strong, emotional, almost visceral attachment to land that you're seeing. But going to your point about tourism, yes, because remember also that Kenya sent the army into Somalia was not triggered by the bombings that were taking place in Wajir or Mandera or anything. It was triggered by the kidnappings of tourists. Remember that the American embassy was bombed by Al-Qaeda back in 1998. Right. And there was already a link established between Al-Qaeda and Somalia then. Kenya didn't see fit to go into Somalia then. It was only when Al-Shabaab started targeting the tourists and we saw the travel advisory start, that Kenya felt the need to go and protect what is one of its top foreign exchange earners.
Yes. And on that, I have to add that, as Udrak says, to that point, it's clear that Kenya is actually not fighting it in Somalia. Kenya is basically fighting a war that was meant for Britain and U.S. We are taking the bullet that was directed at the tourists from U.S. and tourists from Britain and other parts of the West.
You're listening to Global Journalist. I'm Jim Flink. We're looking at the rise of Al-Shabaab, its attacks in the region, and what the group's emergence means for Africa. We're joined by Udo Akamimo, a Kenyan journalist working for Royal Media Services. She also hosts a weekly political talk show on Citizen TV. Harrison Masiko is an editor for The Daily Nation, the most widely circulated newspaper in Kenya. He is at the Washington Post this summer. And David Shin is a professor of international affairs at George Washington University, also former U.S. ambassador to Ethiopia. And do want to remind you again, you can listen to this and other full episodes of Global Journalist on our website. That's globaljournalist.org. For more Global Journalist content, you can also like us on Facebook, or you can follow us on Twitter at Global Journ. Ambassador, I want to talk with you a little bit about the fact that when the government lays all of this or some of this recent violence on the doorstep of the political opposition rather than Al-Shabaab, does that in fact weaken its position rather than strengthen it? It seems that the motivation would be to say that the government isn't losing control of the region to Al-Shabaab, but could that backfire?
Well, I think it does indeed weaken the government's position. It tends to put the focus in a direction that doesn't deal with the issues that exist in the coastal area and indeed in other parts of Kenya. It makes them all an internal domestic political issue, and that's not the way to deal with extremism and terrorism. You need to deal with the root problems in the coastal area. And I just don't see enough being done to do that, and trying to deflect the focus elsewhere, I think, is a short-term tactical mistake and works to the advantage of Al-Shabaab.
Uduak, does that lend itself to the argument that maybe the government is confounded by how to deal with what's going on the coast?
I think ordinary Kenyans would agree with that assessment. The deflection of the responsibility for the attacks has been put on local, politics, even though Al-Shabaab has come out to claim responsibility. And so very dark humor in Kenya, actually. Kenyans find humor in everything. And so you'll find on social media, in fact, I think there was a cartoon in Harrison's paper, The Daily Nation, recently with Al-Shabaab and the government going at each other, Al-Shabaab claiming we did it, you didn't, did too, did not, did too, did not. And it's unfortunate. It really is unfortunate. You've got to laud Kenyans for, being able to see things that way. But yes, ordinary Kenyans are frustrated. They've been, we've wondered why the heads haven't rolled within the agencies and organs and ministries responsible for security. We've had defiance from the people who are tasked with securing Kenya. And so, Kenyans are helpless. The government is confounded, although it says it's doing things. For instance, the Nyumba Kumi initiative, a community policing initiative, they've tried to roll out, they've commissioned a safety and security project which should strengthen the equipment that the police force has. But the feeling is too little, too late, not enough. We need to address things like corruption, which goes back to the economics. The people who are tasked with securing us are often very poorly paid, very poorly resourced. The people who should be ensuring that Kenya is safe are not public safety experts. And so it begs the question, is there a shortage of, security personnel in Kenya who can do the job?
All the while, the rift between the 85% sort of identified as Christian population, the 15% that identify as Muslim seems to grow. Does it not, Harrison?
And before I go to that, I wanted to add something about the pursuit of political conspiracy theories by the Nairobi regime. Actually, it could be a good reason, or they could have good reasons for doing that. But then what we are not seeing as citizens is the lack of finding what they are chasing. This is a wild goose chase because in as much as MRC, Mombasa Republican Council, was at some time during elections linked to some politicians, and it was believed to be being used by some political aspirants to get votes and to win seats. But then when you talk of politics and you do not arrest enough people to arraign in court, and I'm sure the Lamu governor's case, you will see it crumbling after some time. So they talk of politics. They say there are people doing it. We are not seeing arrests. We are not seeing prosecutions. The few that are going on after some time, just give it time, you will see it crumbling. Then you don't see anything that was actually being pursued. Then someone has already come out and claimed responsibility. Directly or indirectly, Al-Shabaab is involved in these things. But then the government does not want to admit this. What was the other question, Jim?
Just real quickly, the rift seems to be growing between the minority Muslim population and the majority Christian population.
Yes, and to the advantage and benefit of Al-Shabaab, actually that's one of the angles it is pursuing, because before this slaughtering started, there were sporadic and isolated cases of churches being burned here and there. Then in retaliation, some mosques being raided by police. And then we've never seen Christians actually burning down a mosque, but they usually feel unsafe, and then police swing into action. Sometimes they raid mosques, and mosques are believed to be sacred places for Muslims. They don't just allow anybody to walk in, so there were those complaints. So Al-Shabaab is pursuing that angle, and like after the slaughter of 60 people in Mpeketoni, it came out clearly and said that land belongs to Muslims. So basically saying Muslims should actually fight more and should drive these people called Christians out of this region. So, yeah.
Jim, no, I want to disagree with that.
Okay.
I want to disagree with that.
Go ahead.
I think that Al-Shabaab certainly has tried to drive a wedge between Christians and Muslims. And yes, Christian churches have been attacked. We've also seen the same take place within the Muslim community. But the people from the Muslim side who have been killed have been what the Kenyan media here calls preachers of hate, clerics accused of radicalizing youth. One moderate cleric was killed recently, but you have seen shows of solidarity by both Christian and Muslim leaders. There have been messages about tolerance and not buying into Al-Shabaab's tactics of divide and hate. So you have that, although I have to say that the government doesn't help itself when it goes after communities perceived to be either Muslim or Somali. So one of the actions that also took place in response to the Al-Shabaab threat was this rounding up of illegal immigrants in Kenya.
Yes.
And then you focused on a community which is inhabited mainly by Somalis. And so again, the narrative begins. Look at what they're doing to our people. Look at what they're doing to our religion. We must fight. We must defend our people. So the government doesn't seem to. It seems to score, a lot of own goals, is the honest truth. But in terms of dividing the faith, I don't see that happening. What I do see as happening, particularly at the height of the roundup of illegals, was that if anything had happened to a Somali, whether they were a legal refugee or an ethnic Kenyan Somali, no one would have raised a finger in defense of that person. And so I do think that ethnic relations have worsened as a result, because what you also see in the aftermath of the Mpeketoni attack was, the government saying, oh, we will help those people. So it's, hang on, there's been conflict, there's been violence, and people dying in northern Kenya, in western Kenya, in various parts of the country. Why was there no attempt to move in to help them? Why is there assistance going to the victims of Mpeketoni?
Really quickly, I want to bring the ambassador back in and talk about particularly the U.S. role. With just about a minute left, Ambassador, let's talk a little bit about the U.S. and Western role in all of this, and whether the U.S. is, in effect, playing its cards correctly here.
Well, the United States is deeply engaged in Somalia itself in an effort to combat Al-Shabaab and to support the African Union mission in Somalia, of which the Kenyan forces are a component, together with several other troops from several other countries. So in that sense, we're very much involved. The United States has also been supportive of Kenya in trying to help improve its anti-terrorism effort. It's questionable how successful that has been. There's some good news and some not so good news. In the final analysis, it's up to the Kenyan government to run that effort and to do it successfully. And I think it has a lot of room for improvement.
And with about 20 seconds, as we see increasing evidence of violence and these emergent groups, what is the maybe one or two things the U.S. can do best to address this going forward?
I think to encourage the government of Kenya and not only the U.S. but the entire international community to urge the Kenyan government to focus on the root causes, which is everything from economic inequality to political marginalization. And those are the long-term solutions. They're expensive and they take a long time. But that's the only real solution to the indigenous problems in the coastal area. And remember, these are Swahili-speaking peoples. They're, for the most part, not Somalis, although they have, some of them have aligned themselves with the extremism of Al-Shabaab.
That's all for this edition of Global Journalist, a production of the Reynolds Journalism Institute and the Missouri School of Journalism. Our thanks to our guests today, Uduaka Mimo, Harrison Masiko, and former Ambassador David Shin. Our executive producer is Casey Morrell. Our lead producer this week is Bantul Hassan, with assistance from Jessica Ananya, Varvava Fomina, and Olga Krishdaleva. Travis McMillan from the Reynolds Journalism Institute is our technical director. Pat Akers from KBIA is our audio engineer. Join us again next time for another edition of Global Journalist. I'm Jim Flink. Thanks for listening.